All right. Welcome back to Cambridge Inside Out. I feel like we're a fraction of our former selves. But Susana Segat had to scoot out to a prior engagement. So we're going to sort of wing it from here. So again, my name is Robert Winters, and
I'm Dennis Carlone, and hopefully I'll hold up for Susana in her absence.
Right. But I assure you,
not as attractive.
Right. All right, but you're okay.
Yeah, it's all right.
Yeah. One of the things I thought I might do, just a few minutes, just say a couple of quick announcements. For those who have an interest in such things, the Human Rights Commission tomorrow is April 16th.
Correct.
They're having from 5 to 7 p.m. at City Hall the annual Fair Housing Awards ceremony. If you have an interest in that, you might want to check that out. On Monday, this coming Monday, April 21st, in addition to the running of the Boston Marathon, City of Cambridge has its annual celebrations at the Cambridge Common for Patriots Day, starting at 10:45 a.m. At the Washington Monument, located at the, actually I don't know what the Washington Monument on the Cambridge Common is.
There is a memorial that is dedicated to the Washington tree, the Washington elm.
Right around,
I think
right
that's what it is.
All right. I actually have objects made from the original Washington elm. I treasure them. All right. By the way, I will also, and I think I mentioned this on the last program too, for those who are interested in going on a hike that day, you can meet me down at 9 a.m. at the JP at the Forest Hill Station. We're going to walk from there to Heartbreak Hill.
Cool.
So anybody who wants to come along, just give me a shout or just show up. Anyway, several other things as well, but I thought we might just sort of get on into some specifics. So in our previous half hour, we mentioned a few things such as Foundry Building and, other things that have happened during the opening. What do we now do? 3.5 months now as a city councilor?
Just shy of that, yes.
All right. But I thought maybe what we do is sort of touch upon some particular initiatives or things that you played an active role as a sponsor, either a sole sponsor or as a co-sponsor of various city council orders.
That would be great.
Just sort of use that as sort of a vehicle for walking through the last few months. One of them, I don't know, you want to dive into the election-related one first?
Well, that would be a good one in that, think about this. I know you know the experience of running for an office, and whatever the result is, it's done. And then all of a sudden, there was a whole nother process.
It's like a hockey. It was the second season. Yeah.
And you were ready to sort of wind down, and it just kept going. And the uncertainty was just as much.
Yes.
The random factor that you write about.
Actually, let's just say specifically what this was. This was a council order that you submitted on February 10th, which didn't actually advocate making a change so much as asking what steps would be involved in making a change in the way we do our PR elections. Not so much in the way we do the election itself, but in the way the vote transfers occur.
That's right.
When we do have surplus ballots, they have a method known as the Cincinnati method, which I'll be happy to talk about some other day. But it has a small but very annoying random element as part of it. And there is an alternative known as fractional transfer it is actually for the software that we use, it's actually the default option of the software. So your order basically called for looking into whether there would be either a charter change necessary or whether this could be done administratively or home rule petition or whatever. Nobody knows for sure exactly how such a change could be made. And nobody's yet saying, let's make the change, right?
That's correct.
Your order just sort of said, get the information.
It just, like I think you said, the more certainty there is in this non-random factor, if that's not part of the system, the more certain people would be whether they should challenge the vote or not. And not only would it save money, frankly, it set the whole council schedule back a month and a half.
It did.
Training and getting ready, and boy, that first meeting without training was rather strange, I have to say.
Right. Now, a little bird told me that you may be getting a response back on this in early May.
Boy, you're good, because I haven't heard that. It's funny, though, because I've been thinking about this and raising it
Well, I've been sort of
I hope
asking
so.
around, and the thing is, really, all you're going to be getting back, I imagine, when it does come, will just sort of be saying, well, these are the options you could do if you really want to move on it. So it's not going to be anything earth-shattering, but it'd be just nice to at least get some information. And honestly, I have no idea what the city council will want to do once they have the options before them.
That's absolutely right. I guess if you've been elected once, you're less inclined to think about
That's
let's
right.
tinker
If it
with
ain't
the
broke,
system.
don't fix it, right? If it
But I
works, then-
certainly would, just from what we went through, and even the extra added cost, if nothing else, when you think you're done. There's nothing worse to ask people for money for an election and then come right back and say,
give me more
we
money."
have to hire a lawyer,
Yeah,
a
yeah.
lawyer, and it's terrible.
Actually, for me, the prime motivation for making a change would be to completely remove all incentives for asking for recounts for all the wrong reasons.
Totally agree.
Right now, and it's actually happened. Susana knows because she was
I
involved in
know.
a very close election in
I
the
know.
2001 school committee race. There's actually an incentive to actually seek a recount, not because you actually doubt the truthfulness of the ballot count so much as that you want to have a ballot move so that you can take advantage of this random element to maybe, the phrase I've used is you get a second roll of the dice.
That's absolutely right.
And I would love to get rid of that aspect of the
You
election.
have my vote.
Right. But the other thing too is that back in the old days when this was all done with paper ballots, a recount was a pretty straightforward process because when they originally counted the ballots, they put identifying marks on them, and then if they had to do a recount, they just pulled them out again and just recount. Oh, this one has to move. But basically, they just went right through them and it was done. It didn't have to take more than a few days. With the electronic balloting, they have to do, because of the strangeness of the law, they have to do a matching process of matching the electronic data for the ballots to the paper ballots. That's what
Interesting.
takes most of the time. And if you could change to a system where the ordering of the ballots was irrelevant, you wouldn't have to do any of that.
Boy,
You
that's
could
what it should be.
It would be, even if we had to have a recount, for the right reasons or the wrong reasons, it would be faster and cheaper. So
You should be
I'm
in
sold.
charge. But one thing I learned is the staff that did it and the election commission, when I realized they wanted it to be the same, they weren't going to change anything,
Yeah.
I felt better. And they were really remarkable. I
Yeah.
have to say, I got
And
to know them all.
Honestly, it's not an easy job because you're dealing with a lot of emotions, there are people challenging.
Absolutely.
And so they have to kind of keep everybody kind of steady through this and get the job done and do it in as reasonable a period of time as possible.
It was impressive.
Yeah.
I don't want to go through it again, but it was impressive.
I don't want to go through it either. My feeling about recounts has been for some time that it was a good thing to do every once in a while because when you recount it, an election that otherwise was counted electronically,
That's
it's a
right.
verification
That's
of
right.
the accuracy, and it's no results have been changed. Even the number of ballots that have moved have been remarkably few, both in 2001,
That's
2009, and again in 2013. So I think it's it's proven itself. So we don't need to do recounts for that purpose anymore.
Oh, I hope I get this video and we use this someday.
Yes. All right. So that's one thing that, honestly, that was something of great interest to me.
And to me, it just makes sense, and it saves all this anxiety that wasn't necessary.
Yeah, definitely. Now, another big one, both in terms of the size of the issue, but also the size of the structure.
Yes.
March 17th, there was an order co-sponsored by 4 city councilors, yourself, Councilor Mazin, McGovern, and Toomey, addressing the disposition of the Edward J. Sullivan Courthouse in East
Yes.
Cambridge.
Yes.
And I don't know actually I don't know if there's any sort of scuttlebutt about where that now stands.
Yes. But in summary, that policy order said that it pretty much reiterated what the city has to do legally, but I wanted it to be clear to everybody that we weren't just looking at what the city would gain leasing parking spaces in the East Cambridge garage to the developer, but we were responsible to look at all the impacts of changing a building to office use, and some of the design changes. And some are good, don't misunderstand me, but the bulk of the impact is still there. And that's what this policy order was. The result of that is the manager, and maybe we didn't discuss this in a meeting, we just all approved it, came back with a notice that said he will not pursue
Right.
any negotiation until the council tells him to.
That's right.
And what complicates this, and I think makes it even more interesting, is, as I recall, when we built the East Cambridge garage, because it's in the East Cambridge Riverfront project, the city can lease only half of the spaces in a parking garage if it's built as a public garage. Well,
And is that kind of a permanent condition?
well, that's the
Or can that be
question.
modified?
Is after 20 years, does that go away? Because it's been 30 odd
Or
years.
could the city council vote
Well,
in some
it
manner
was
to
public
change
money. It was
Oh,
state
because of
money.
that.
So, but
So
you
there
know,
may
this
be
is
some
a
strings
state use.
attached.
But I raised that and said there are only like 170 spaces left that can be leased.
Right.
And they were asking for approximately 400 and change. And I said, we got to look into this because
Yeah.
this might not work anyway.
You know, one issue that still puzzles me and kind of irritates me about that is that, you know, there's certain things you can set either through zoning or other means, primarily zoning, certain limitations about what can be built in the space. But then there are something, because this was a courthouse,
That's
you know,
right.
it's a state use, or
That's right.
or you know, let's say actually there are some exemptions for churches as well.
Well, height of
for height,
steeple.
right.
Maybe parking, but I don't
Right.
think much else. The other guidelines have to be followed.
Yeah, but the thing that's sort of troubling and unresolved, at least in my mind, is that if, because of an agency that's involved in constructing a building, they do something that just blows away existing limitations on height, density, and any other thing, and then after some period of time, and
That's
honestly,
right.
in the great grand scale of things, this is not forever. This was what, a 50-year duration?
It's 45
50.
years,
Yeah.
less than 50.
So then when the courthouse vacates, so then that use, which was the exempt use, and they just head for Woburn, and maybe they'll come back someday, I don't know. Then the structure remains, and they say, well, now is it or is it not a non-conforming, pre-existing structure here?
And I understand there are people on both sides, lawyers, who think differently, but think about this. If it isn't against the rules, what stops the state from building yet another building?
Exactly.
Huge.
Right.
And then selling that. So
That's exactly right.
And we agree.
And I would love to see that issue settled.
It will be the issue.
Yeah.
It will be the issue.
I think
And
that's something the state has to kind of
I
enter
agree.
into the discussion and
that,
say,
that complicates it,
Yeah.
obviously.
yeah.
It's,
And in a way, they were in a business of trying to dispose of a property, which for them was sort of a white elephant.
that's
I
right.
guess we were talking.
Terrible white elephant.
Right, and so where does the state's responsibility begin and end in this? Certainly they could say, well, our responsibility was at DCAM, the
Mm-hmm.
Division of the Commonwealth Assets and Management,
Right.
something or other. You know, they just said our job basically begins and ends with getting the best deal financially for the state. And I say, well, maybe some of us are going to disagree with that.
Well, it's been quite a response, and yeah, I agree. It will be interesting, and sadly, I think it'll be a long time down the road.
Now, there was was it a subsequent order, or was it, I think, right away principally from Councilor Toomey, that actually specifically asked that question about, is this a, you know, a pre-existing non-conforming use? My first response when I saw it was, well, of course it is. And then I said, well, maybe that's not so clear.
Well, the use might have been, but the building is definitely not proper.
Yeah. So I don't know how that's going to get settled. but
It's,
it's,
you know,
tough
I
one.
mentioned the parking issue earlier.
Yeah.
If what I recall is correct, and again, you're right, it might have changed over 20 years or 30 years, it might not be valid, they will not get enough parking to build the whole or maintain the whole
Right.
building. So the compromise might be found there, that, you know, maybe we can figure out a way to give them more than 100 and whatever it is, 50 spaces, but the building, part of it has to go down. And the neighbors are right to say, well, it's being demolished anyway, everything but the steel structure. The steel structure is actually the easiest thing to take down.
The only thing protecting their pre-existing non-conforming status is the law, not the structure.
That's right.
Right?
So it's going to be interesting. It'll be a national case.
Yeah.
I really believe that.
Yeah, anyway, I'm very, very interested to see how
for
that
you.
one kind of plays itself out in time. Let's see. We've got a few other ones in here. I see you were one of the co-sponsors on an order with Councilors Mazin and Chung calling for a little more movement in the direction of municipal broadband.
Boy, yes, and I'm sure you agree. We get complaints every week from people when they get their bills, but even from people who don't have the income to have broadband, that if the city controlled it, well, we just learned that if the city controlled it, and that could be over time, the system could be very different. And we just heard, is it Santa Monica? Santa Monica has a broadband, their own broadband. Google moved in. Google is renting it from them. It's now an income stream.
Right.
And it's like, it is a public utility, like the water department.
Yeah. I don't know where this goes or what evolves out of this, but I think there are some interesting creative possibilities that I certainly haven't even dreamed up yet.
Absolutely.
Now, the order actually called for appointing a task force of experts, residents, Cambridge Housing Authority, representatives from the universities, et cetera. I'm hopeful that something interesting will come of this.
I think there's cautious interest in pursuing this, but at a minimum, let's start putting conduit in all the streets. And that's what Santa Monica had done. And we have been told, Councilor Mazin had a very good committee meeting that touched on this, that it costs 10% to put the conduit in now, even through difficult intersections, compared to the 100% if you're ripping it all up and have to destroy things.
And as I mentioned on a previous program, the city has been routinely putting in conduit into the streets whenever any road project, but it's primarily been to make sure for traffic signal systems and things like that.
Or the city system.
Yeah, or the city system,
which exists.
Right. So anyway, it'll be kind of interesting if that goes anywhere. Now here's one where I'm going to ask you about this one here, because I think this is where I can kind of quiz you on your point of view about from an urban design point of view. So this was on April 7th, sort of an exciting meeting, as I recall.
Yes, it was.
But this was one basically just asking for a report back on the status of the Grand Junction path.
Yes.
So that's an interesting can of worms for me. I mean,
it is.
It's a lot of opportunities, and people are primarily just sort of, well, what's going to happen? Are we going to get a little piece of park here? Is it going to be a linear path, a bike path, or whatever? So let me first ask straight away. If I could make you guy in charge, and you wanted to just sort of say the very, very best possible dreamy outcome for that corridor, what might that be?
Well, when I spoke to people hoping for the bike path, I said, number one, the mass transit element has to be there, because Kendall Square cannot expand 2 million plus square feet.
Now, by mass transit, are you talking about what we're calling the urban ring, which is a little bit on ice
or
right
something,
now?
something like that. At least the possibility. And what I was told through two different people representing different sides is that it looks like both could work. Now, you're a bike rider, I believe, and is it comfortable to ride a bike next to a train coming by?
There's always a separation.
Yeah, but is that enough? That was my only question to the person. They said, yeah, that would work.
It's done in a lot of places.
So, I mean, ideally they would be more separate, just for sanity reasons.
Well, the other thing is that I don't think anybody's talking about a rapid transit line here, though in an ideal world, if we had billion extra dollars to spend, that would be great.
I actually do think there'll be a rapid transit line there. It might be a bus line, it might be tram, but I do think that, and I tell you why I think that. I think it's going to be essential. I know it's going to be essential. If we're going to develop everything the way the city wants to develop it, and landowners,
we should have that.
Oh, no question. And
I agree.
Same with the bike.
Yeah.
To me, that's another
All right,
kind of mass transit.
Now let me put me as guy in charge for a second and say sort of my little dream about this is that like housing is going to be developing in Union Square.
Yes.
Somerville's initiatives, not only Union Square, but also other places in East Somerville.
Yes.
If a fair amount of housing developed there, an appropriate amount of housing in the kind of Cambridge end of this, as well as some over in some of the newer parts of land that'll be opened up with the realignment of the Mass Pike on the other side of
Yes.
the river, that corridor as a linear path. Think about it. MIT would look. Why wouldn't they love this?
Absolutely.
They could have.
They want it.
It would have a great source of new housing for
Yep.
MIT students who they hop on the bike path. 5 minutes later, they're at MIT.
No question.
And they could live over in East Somerville. It could facilitate housing. It could solve so many problems.
Totally agree.
So it bothers me a little when I hear people just sort of talking about, well, let's just design this little bit of dog leg of a piece of property that the redevelopment authority. I want people to think a little bit grander on this.
Boy, we agree totally, and I'll quote you on that. I might associate it with something else, but no, I agree that there's a resource there, and it's always been transportation.
Yeah.
Always, when it was a canal, then railroad. This is the newer version of that. It's
Right.
It's not full railroad. It's more mass transit, but bicycle to me is part of the mass transit system. I know people don't think of it that way, but in that case, it really would be.
It's also a direct connection in a city and a region that often lacks direct connections.
Totally agree, especially the two extremes, north
Yeah.
and south.
Yeah,
Absolutely right.
In an ideal world, it would be easier crossing the Charles River than the limited number of options that exist
Yes.
today. But those are big capital projects to make happen. And moving roads is something people just don't want to do these days.
That's right.
But I just think that would just
No,
be a grand
I
thing.
agree with you.
All right. Now, there's no way we can kind of get away without mentioning.
I know where we're going.
Right. There was both in the political campaign as well as during the current city council term, there were a lot of talk about sort of, I've heard different phrases used, either citywide planning, master plan, or revision, or re-looking at of the existing plans. People say different things about that. But so we had two orders, somewhat competing, somewhat complementary, at the last city council meeting that were currently are sitting on the table.
Yes.
And the mayor is now charged with sort of cobbling together something that will at least get some kind of process.
Yeah,
that everybody
we're
will be
talking
happy with.
about it shortly.
Now, are you running it? Is there some of these same kind of dicey issues with open meeting law, with getting the mayor to facilitate a cobbling
No,
together?
because you're allowed to have up to, I can talk to 3 other people, and this would be sort of a joint one. So
Right.
it's a little different. I imagine we're still limited to 4
But you have
people.
to kind of avoid the serial meeting issue too.
Yes.
So
You really have to think about this.
I know that they got to change these
We
rules.
started talking to people, myself and another counselor, and
Are we allowed to talk?
and all of a sudden we looked at each other and we stopped.
Zip it.
So we're trying to follow the law.
I know, and I respect the intention of the open meeting law.
I do too.
But my goodness, when it actually stands in the way of
Working together.
I can't go with that.
We agree. I think almost 9-0 on that
Right.
one. But the state requires that we have a master plan. I'm sure you've looked that up. And the state says what a master plan is, and we don't have all those pieces. We have parts of it. We might have studies from different areas, but they have to be put together. And the commonalities are transportation, open space, utilities. I'm sure there are others that are not coming to mind now. The impact on housing, if you build too much commercial, which is actually what happened in the city. And so sometimes we're focusing on such small portions that we perhaps are not understanding the full picture. And all I said was, well, alewife, everybody, and I feel for my neighbors out there, it's kind of a hodgepodge. It's like urban sprawl, and it, we need to understand what the impacts are, even to building housing, and even building housing that is cheap looking. Concrete clapboard on everything or concrete plywood. Is that really what we want the city to be? You know about New Street and the fact that housing, 230 units of housing, not quite half has been built, and the street is a complete mess. Right. In fact, it's dangerous. Bikers.
Yeah, I'm sure that the street will get some pretty significant improvements in time,
but
it's
only
a chicken and egg
after the
thing.
fact. Once the city says this is going to be housing, that's when the street needs to be designed for that. Right. Or how people even get to the Red Line at Alewife from there. It's through a dangerous.
It's tough.
And think of little kids, 12-year-olds, or not little kids, but 12-year-olds, and you go, whoa, I'm not. So, and the city can't control all of it, but at least a strategy and trying to implement it is key. And all I was trying to do was push that, because I've been wanting to do this for more than 10 years.
One of the things that I find is one of the most sort of almost intractable problems associated with this is when you actually talk about the transportation piece of this, the city doesn't control all the assets here. I mean, you've got Route 2 going through there.
No, it's true.
And also historically, the big part of Route 2 just sort of slammed into a wall right there, and then kind of, it's like forcing a fire hose through a straw.
But we control everything else, and think about all the other roads that don't exist.
Right.
That could, what you don't want is to have all the traffic on one road.
Right. Yeah. Now, I don't know what the solutions are going to be, but I totally agree with you that a pretty serious transportation planning effort for that part of town especially definitely is called for.
I agree.
Anyway, we're going to have to wind this down here now, just when it was getting good right now. So anyway, until next week, this has been another issue of Cambridge Inside Out.
Good night.